Eleanor Miller walked alone into the grand lobby of the most prestigious luxury hotel in Manhattan that crisp autumn evening. The cold New York wind whipped through the bustling streets outside, but inside the opulent ballroom, the atmosphere was thick with the scent of expensive floral arrangements and the arrogant warmth of high society. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over the polished marble floors, illuminating the city's financial elite as they clinked crystal glasses filled with vintage champagne. Eleanor wore a simple, beautifully tailored black dress that contrasted sharply with the extravagant, jewel-encrusted gowns swirling around her. She held her head high, her posture radiating a quiet confidence that immediately set her apart from the desperate social climbers who usually frequented such exclusive gatherings. As she navigated the sea of silk and velvet, she remained completely indifferent to the curious and judging glances cast in her direction by the wealthy attendees. Standing near the center of the room, holding court by the main tables, the Kingsley family did not take long to notice her arrival. Barbara Kingsley, the formidable matriarch of the family, adjusted the heavy string of flawless pearls resting against her collarbone and narrowed her eyes. Beside her, wearing a brilliant emerald gown covered in imported rhinestones, her daughter Victoria crossed her arms and tilted her head with a sneer of absolute disdain. "Mother, look over there," Victoria said, projecting her voice just loud enough so that several influential guests standing nearby could hear her cruel tone. "I certainly do not remember seeing that woman on our exclusive guest list. Who does she think she is, walking in here like she owns the place?" Barbara directed a freezing, calculating glare toward Eleanor, her lips curling into a condescending smile. "My dear, I am absolutely certain that her name does not appear anywhere on our approved list of invitees," Barbara pronounced in a voice that was soft but dripping with undeniable venom. "This is a private gala for New York's finest, not a public charity event for anyone wandering in off the streets of Manhattan." The people surrounding the Kingsleys chuckled softly, eager to agree with the powerful family that controlled a massive portion of the city's real estate market. Eleanor did not falter, nor did she allow their piercing stares to slow her measured pace. She walked with unwavering purpose straight to the mahogany registration desk stationed near the grand arched entrance. When she arrived, she calmly opened her understated clutch and retrieved a thick, cream-colored invitation card embossed with gleaming gold lettering. "Good evening," she said in a polite and cordial tone to the head of security. "Here is my formal invitation for tonight's event." The security guard, a tall and imposing man dressed in a severe dark suit, took the card and examined it with intense scrutiny, running his thumb over the raised golden seal. "It appears to be entirely legitimate, ma'am," the guard commented, his voice carrying slightly in the sudden quiet of the immediate area. He checked the watermark and the intricate relief that marked the authentic invitations of the evening. "It seems," Barbara repeated, stepping forward and letting out a brief, icy laugh that echoed across the nearby tables. "You security guards are simply not capable of confirming anything with absolute certainty. This sophisticated event is highly exclusive, not some open market in the middle of a public park where anyone with a counterfeit piece of paper can simply waltz right in." The contained laughter from the guests began to ripple through various corners of the massive ballroom, growing into a low, uncomfortable buzz of gossip and mockery. Several younger attendees pulled out their expensive smartphones to discreetly record the unfolding drama. Thomas Kingsley, the youngest son of the family, and a notorious social media provocateur, raised his phone without a shred of shame and instantly began a live broadcast to his massive following. "Oh, this is going to be incredibly interesting, guys," Thomas whispered into the microphone with a cynical smirk, eager to publicly humiliate the newcomer for the entertainment of his online audience. Eleanor maintained her unshakable calm, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. It was certainly not the first time she had been looked at as if she did not belong, but the heavy atmosphere of extreme luxury, combined with the suffocating arrogance of the Kingsley family, was actively putting her patience to the test. She took a slow, deep breath, planting her feet firmly on the marble floor and stood tall with her dignity completely intact. She knew the rules of this superficial world better than they could ever imagine, and she was prepared to stand her ground against the rising tide of their baseless hostility. Suddenly, a young waiter in a crisp white uniform passed closely behind Eleanor, balancing a heavy silver tray loaded with tall crystal glasses filled with expensive red wine. His steps were naturally steady, trained for years in the art of high-level hospitality, but someone deliberately shoved him hard from behind just as he drew parallel to Eleanor. The tray tipped violently, and a full glass of crimson liquid tipped over, pouring directly onto the pristine fabric of Eleanor's elegant black dress. The impact was instantaneous, the dark red wine soaking into the delicate material as if it possessed a malicious intent to mark her permanently before the entire elite crowd. A brief, shocked silence fell over the immediate vicinity, followed instantly by a cruel outburst of muffled laughter from the Kingsley circle. "Oh, what absolute clumsiness!" Victoria exclaimed, dramatically covering her mouth with her hand in an exaggerated display of fake surprise, though her eyes were actively sparkling with malicious amusement. "Although, considering her incredibly basic attire, I suppose she is completely accustomed to these sorts of unfortunate, messy accidents in her daily life." The guests surrounding her laughed even louder, eager to gain favor with the influential heiress by participating in the bullying. Eleanor slowly lowered her gaze for a brief moment to look at the massive dark stain spreading across the side of her dress. She could feel the uncomfortable dampness clinging coldly to her skin, but what burned her far more were the mocking stares and the piercing laughter echoing from every direction in the opulent room. Before Eleanor had the opportunity to react or step away, Victoria eagerly stepped forward, snatching a white cloth napkin from a nearby table. "Please, allow me to assist you with that terrible mess," Victoria offered in a sickeningly sweet, entirely feigned tone of politeness. Victoria leaned toward Eleanor, but instead of dabbing the stain delicately to absorb the liquid, she pressed the cloth napkin forcefully into the fabric, violently rubbing it in a circular motion to ensure the wine spread further, and completely ruined the expensive material. "Oh, what a terrible shame! It appears that I am simply no good at cleaning up dirty things," Victoria added with thick sarcasm, stepping back to admire her destructive handiwork. The laughter from the high society crowd erupted once again, harsher and louder than before. Thomas Kingsley immediately adjusted the angle of his smartphone to capture the ruined dress in high definition, his screen lighting up with a rapid flood of incoming comments. "This is absolute pure gold for the channel," Thomas muttered to his viewers, thoroughly enjoying the pain and humiliation being inflicted upon an innocent woman. A young, sympathetic waitress named Sarah took a hesitant step forward with a clean towel, genuinely wanting to help Eleanor, but a sharp, threatening glare from Barbara Kingsley froze the poor girl in her tracks, forcing her to retreat into the shadows of the ballroom. Eleanor tightly pressed her lips together, her mind racing but her exterior perfectly still. She knew with absolute certainty that they had provoked this humiliating incident on purpose, and that nothing about the shoved waiter or the ruined dress was a mere coincidence. However, she actively forced herself to maintain her absolute composure, refusing to give them the emotional breakdown they so desperately craved. She straightened her spine, squared her shoulders, and locked her gaze directly onto Victoria's eyes without blinking, radiating a silent strength that made the younger woman's mocking smile falter for a fraction of a second. The head of security, growing increasingly uncomfortable with the rising tension and the public spectacle, took a hesitant step forward. "Ma'am, perhaps it would be best if you waited out in the main hallway while we attempt to clarify your attendance status," he suggested in a low, hushed tone, desperately trying to avoid a larger scandal that could cost him his prestigious job. Eleanor turned her head slowly, looking the tall guard directly in the eyes with an expression of sheer stone. "I possess just as much right as any single person in this room to be standing here tonight," Eleanor responded with complete serenity, though her voice carried a sharp, unyielding edge that genuinely surprised the seasoned security guard. Barbara Kingsley scoffed loudly, adjusting her heavy pearl necklace once more while flashing a smile of absolute superiority. "We shall firmly decide that fact when my husband arrives, as I am quite certain he will know exactly how to restore proper order to this chaotic situation." Meanwhile, the live broadcast on Thomas's phone continued to skyrocket, with over 15,000 people watching the cruel spectacle unfold in real time. The red wine had begun to dry slightly on the fabric of Eleanor's dress, leaving a dark, sticky trail that seemed to loudly broadcast the intense shame the wealthy family was attempting to impose upon her. Yet, Eleanor remained standing firmly in the exact center of the lavish ballroom, completely surrounded by disguised laughter, intensely curious stares, and a constant buzzing murmur that made the heavily perfumed air vibrate with hostility. The atmosphere, choked with the scent of expensive cologne and unfiltered arrogance, grew heavier and more suffocating with every passing second. The security guard, sweating slightly under the pressure of the elite crowd, gestured nervously toward the grand exit doors once again. "Ma'am, I strongly suggest that it would be for the best if you accompanied me outside right now while we clear up this unfortunate misunderstanding," the guard insisted, his voice trembling slightly under Barbara's watchful, predatory gaze. Eleanor slowly turned her face toward him, holding his nervous gaze with unwavering firmness. "I do not plan on leaving this room. I have been formally invited, and I hold my legitimate invitation card right here in my hand. I absolutely refuse to allow anyone to treat me as if I were some common intruder." Her clear, confident words resonated powerfully in the momentary silence of the ballroom. Several guests, genuinely taken aback by the incredible strength and certainty in her voice, shifted uncomfortably in their velvet-cushioned seats. Others, lacking any moral compass, simply covered their mouths to hide their continuing amusement. Victoria Kingsley immediately intervened, completely unwilling to lose a single opportunity to further humiliate her target. "Oh, please. You most likely ordered some cheap copy printed at a local shop. In today's world, any desperate person can forge something like that to crash a high society event." The security guard hesitantly raised the cream-colored card again, looking trapped between his duty and the demands of the powerful family. "Miss Kingsley, I have already thoroughly verified that the embossed relief and the golden seals perfectly match the authentic ones. It truly appears to be genuine." Victoria let out a loud, theatrical gasp, throwing her hands up in the air. "It merely appears genuine. So, there are clearly still lingering doubts about its authenticity, are there not?" Eleanor took a long, deep breath. "My invitation is completely real. I do not need to prove anything else to you or anyone else in this room." Barbara raised her voice so that the entire room could hear her chilling declaration. "A strange woman who enters our prestigious gala wearing a ruined, basic dress, completely lacking an escort, and devoid of any fine jewelry, expects us to blindly believe she belongs at this elite gathering. My dear, in our exclusive world, simply carrying a piece of paper in your hand is not nearly enough to grant you access." As the murmurs in the crowd swelled dangerously, the security guard, heavily pressured by Barbara's icy glare, tentatively reached out to gently grasp Eleanor's arm. "Ma'am, please, accompany me to the lobby," the guard pleaded. Eleanor swiftly pulled her arm away and took a deliberate step backward, her eyes flashing with sudden intensity. "Do not touch me!" she commanded in a tone so incredibly firm and authoritative that the large guard was instantly paralyzed in his tracks. "I have done absolutely nothing wrong tonight, and I refuse to be escorted out of this venue as though I am a common criminal." The bold gesture deeply shocked many of the onlookers, and the previously amused murmurs abruptly shifted into a very tense, heavy silence. Thomas seized the dramatic pause to thrust the camera of his smartphone even closer to Eleanor's face, desperately seeking to capture a tear or a moment of weakness for his eager audience. "Did you guys hear that?" Thomas whispered, grinning widely for his thousands of followers. "This is getting incredibly intense." A respected older gentleman named Mr. Davenport, seated near the central fountain display, cleared his throat uncomfortably and spoke up in a loud, clear voice. "Perhaps we should actually listen to her. She certainly does not carry herself like an imposter." Barbara slowly turned her head toward the older man, absolutely annihilating him with a furious glare. "Mr. Davenport, we supposedly appreciate your unsolicited opinion, but this is strictly a family matter concerning the integrity of our personal event. We shall be the ones to decide who belongs here and who does not." The older man immediately lowered his gaze, settling nervously back into his chair in complete silence, acutely aware that he had just been publicly reprimanded by the most dangerous woman in Manhattan society. Eleanor felt her phone vibrate inside her clutch, sensing that Arthur was finally near, giving her the immense strength to stand tall against the wolves circling her. The heavy murmur was still floating thickly in the air when the imposing figure of Richard Kingsley, the ruthless patriarch of the family empire, appeared at the far end of the grand ballroom. His incredibly serious demeanor, perfectly styled silver hair, and flawless custom-tailored dark suit were more than enough to make dozens of hushed conversations cease immediately. He walked with the heavy, unyielding confidence of a powerful man who was entirely accustomed to having every person in the city obey his every command. Upon seeing him approach, Barbara smiled with immense relief. "My dear husband," she announced loudly, ensuring everyone heard her, "you have arrived precisely in the nick of time." Richard approached the center of the room with heavy, measured steps, looking Eleanor up and down with obvious, unfiltered disdain. "What exactly is occurring here?" he demanded. Victoria eagerly took the lead, speaking rapidly, as if she had been enthusiastically rehearsing this exact scene all evening. "Father, this random woman has deliberately crashed our private event. She claims to possess an invitation, but I am absolutely certain it is a pathetic forgery." Eleanor maintained her perfect calm, looking the powerful billionaire directly in the eye. "I've already presented my formal card. It is entirely authentic." The nervous security guard raised the cream-colored envelope once more, extending it with a trembling hand toward Richard. "Sir, I have personally checked the relief and the golden seals. They completely match the original batch." Richard snatched the invitation from the guard's hand and scrutinized it with freezing calculation, as if he possessed the supernatural ability to detect a lie simply by glaring at a piece of paper. Physical appearances can be highly deceiving, and these types of basic paper documents are incredibly easy for con artists to replicate. Eleanor interrupted him with a serene, unshakable confidence. "My invitation is real. I possess absolutely no need to convince you with anything more than that." Barbara raised her chin, scanning the surrounding crowd of wealthy guests as if seeking a jury's unanimous agreement. "Do you all see this? She does not even possess the basic intelligence to know how to address my husband with the proper respect he commands." Another uncomfortable silence swept through the massive room, broken only when a middle-aged corporate lawyer named Mr. Franklin cautiously decided to speak. "With all due respect, Mrs. Kingsley, it truly does not seem appropriate to publicly humiliate her in this aggressive manner." "Thank you for your thoughts, Mr. Franklin," Barbara replied with a sharp smile that served as a direct, terrifying warning. "However, this specific matter does not concern you in the slightest. This is a private gathering organized exclusively by our family, and we alone hold the power to decide who is worthy of standing in our presence." Mr. Franklin swallowed hard and sank back into his seat, completely silenced by the implicit threat to his career. Victoria seized the quiet moment to inject even more venom into the situation. "Were you simply desperate for a bit of attention? Showing up completely alone in such a basic, uninspired dress must be part of some pathetic strategy to hunt for a wealthy husband." Eleanor, completely unbothered by the cruel taunt, replied clearly, "I am standing here simply because I was formally invited, nothing more. And I absolutely will not tolerate your continuous efforts to invent ridiculous motives to justify your profound lack of basic human decency." Richard raised a heavy hand, instantly imposing total silence over the entire room. "Listen to me very carefully, woman," he growled in a deep, menacing voice. "This situation is incredibly simple. Absolutely no one enters this room who does not belong to our exclusive circle. And you, very clearly, do not belong to our circle." Eleanor held his intimidating gaze without a single moment of hesitation. Simply because I do not belong to your specific circle does not mean I lack the right to be here tonight." Victoria let out a harsh, ironic laugh. "Did you all hear that delusional nonsense? Now it seems that anyone off the street can force their way into an elite event simply by believing they deserve it." Thomas continued to broadcast the entire standoff, focusing on every single gesture and word. The live audience on his stream had just surpassed 40,000 viewers. "This is turning out vastly better than I could have ever expected," he whispered to his phone. Eleanor gripped her clutch tightly in her hands, refusing to yield a single inch of ground to the powerful family. The tension in the ballroom escalated with every passing second, and although it appeared she was standing entirely alone against a room full of enemies, her unwavering eyes revealed a core of pure, unbreakable steel. Barbara, growing increasingly frustrated by the younger woman's resilience, delivered what she believed would be the final blow. "Why do you not simply do us all a massive favor and utilize the service exit by the kitchens? It will save you from enduring any further public embarrassment." Eleanor looked at the expectant faces of the 200 guests. "I am not an employee of this hotel. I am a guest, and I will remain right here." The grand ballroom felt as though it were holding its collective breath, the heavy silence broken only by the distant clinking of glasses from the bar. Just as Richard Kingsley opened his mouth to order the security guards to physically drag Eleanor out, the massive ornate oak doors at the grand entrance swung open with a resounding, thunderous crash. The sharp, commanding sound of leather dress shoes striking the polished marble floor echoed violently, instantly drawing the attention of every single person in the room. Arthur Miller had finally arrived, stepping into the brilliant light with an impeccably tailored dark suit, a blindingly white shirt, and a deep blue tie that perfectly complemented his imposing, powerful posture. His mere physical presence fundamentally altered the atmospheric pressure of the entire room. The quiet murmurs completely died away, transforming into a state of shocked, expectant silence. Eleanor lifted her gaze and saw her husband striding toward her, and a massive wave of profound relief washed over her exhausted body. She had stood alone and endured their relentless cruelty, but Arthur's arrival marked the exact turning point she had been waiting for. Arthur moved through the parting sea of wealthy guests with the undeniable authority of a king, his steel-gray eyes locking first onto Eleanor's face, and then drifting down to the glaring dark wine stain ruining her dress. He smoothly wrapped his strong arm securely around her waist, pulling her close to his side as a physical shield against the hundreds of judgmental eyes that had spent the last hour tearing her apart. "What exactly has transpired here?" Arthur demanded in a deep, booming voice that projected effortlessly into the furthest corners of the massive ballroom. No one dared to answer him immediately. Barbara, recognizing one of the most powerful financial titans in the country, frantically attempted to salvage her poised demeanor. "Arthur, what an absolute surprise to see you. It seems your lovely companion has simply experienced a minor misunderstanding with our security team." "A minor misunderstanding," Arthur repeated slowly, his thick eyebrows drawing together in a terrifying display of suppressed fury. Victoria, completely failing to read the immense danger radiating from the man, foolishly chimed in. She arrived completely alone, and we honestly did not believe she belonged on our highly exclusive guest list. We merely wished to ensure the safety and integrity of the event. Arthur's jaw tightened visibly, his eyes burning with a cold, destructive fire. "And that justifies deliberately pouring red wine over her clothing. That justifies publicly insulting her and attempting to throw her out through a kitchen door?" The crowd's murmuring began to swell once more, tinged heavily with sudden panic. Richard Kingsley took a confident step forward, utilizing the deep, authoritative voice he deployed during ruthless corporate takeovers. "Let us not exaggerate the situation, Miller. It was simply an unfortunate, clumsy incident, nothing more than a trivial accident." Arthur turned his blazing eyes directly onto the older billionaire. "Do not dare speak to me of accidents, Kingsley. My wife was intentionally humiliated in front of 200 people, and your entire family eagerly encouraged the spectacle. Thomas, holding his phone, suddenly realized his broadcast had captured a fatal error. The live viewer count on Thomas's stream had skyrocketed past 80,000 people, the comments flashing by so rapidly they were a blur of absolute outrage aimed at the Kingsleys. The arrogant smirk completely vanished from Thomas's pale face. Eleanor stood tall and proud beside her husband, choosing to remain silent. She did not need to utter a single word. Arthur had arrived, and his powerful voice was rapidly restoring the immense dignity the Kingsley family had desperately tried to steal from her. A wealthy guest, standing near the grand pillar, whispered in sheer terror, "They just messed with the absolute wrong person." Arthur slowly turned his head toward the trembling security guard who had attempted to force Eleanor out. "Did you actively participate in this targeted harassment?" he asked quietly. The guard swallowed heavily, staring at the floor. "Sir, I was strictly following the direct orders of the hosts." Arthur nodded sharply. "You followed entirely wrong orders." Barbara stepped forward, her smile trembling wildly. "Arthur, please, let us not dramatize a simple confusion. I am entirely certain we can clear up this tiny mess in a private room." "No," Arthur interrupted, his voice echoing like a crack of thunder. "We will absolutely not clarify anything in private. Your family chose to publicly mock and degrade my wife in the very center of this ballroom. Therefore, the absolute truth will be revealed right here, in front of every single person who stood by and laughed." The silence that swallowed the room was absolute and terrifying. The Kingsleys stood completely paralyzed. The arrogant power they had wielded just 10 minutes prior was rapidly dissolving into pure, unadulterated fear, completely trapped under the weight of Arthur Miller's righteous vengeance. The luxurious ballroom resembled a silent, frozen battlefield. Nobody dared to take a sip of their drinks, and absolutely nobody dared to utter a single laugh. Every eye in the room was entirely fixed on the Kingsley family, who were actively crumbling under Arthur's unyielding gaze and Eleanor's quiet, restored dignity. Arthur tightened his protective grip on his wife and raised his voice so the entire room and the thousands watching through the live stream could hear his next words with crystal clarity. "Tonight, your arrogant family was planning to proudly announce a massive, multi-million-dollar corporate alliance with Hudson Industries, were you not?" Barbara's heavily powdered face drained of all color, turning a sickly shade of white. Victoria furrowed her brow in profound confusion, completely out of her depth. Richard attempted to maintain his stoic, powerful expression, but a violent, uncontrollable tremor in his left hand betrayed his rising panic. "Allow me to be incredibly clear with you," Arthur continued, his voice dripping with absolute authority. "That lucrative agreement is officially cancelled, effective immediately." The blow was catastrophic. A loud gasp of sheer disbelief erupted from the surrounding guests, many of whom had significant financial stakes heavily tied to that very deal. "What did you just say?" Barbara stammered, her voice thin and weak, as if she truly could not comprehend the reality of the words. "Cancelled," Arthur repeated slowly, ensuring every syllable struck like a hammer. "There will be absolutely no business deal. There will be no alliance. There will be no grand announcement. You get absolutely nothing." Victoria entirely lost whatever remained of her composure. "This is completely absurd. You cannot possibly destroy a major corporate merger simply because of a ruined dress on some woman." Arthur silenced her instantly with a sharp, dismissive wave of his hand. "Silence," he commanded. And for the first time in her pampered life, Victoria obeyed. Thomas's hands were shaking violently as he continued to hold his smartphone. The viewer count on his live broadcast had surged past 150,000 people. It was exactly like watching a catastrophic train derailment in real time. Eleanor quietly observed the faces of the Kingsley family as their massive egos shattered piece by piece. The extreme arrogance they had weaponized against her only minutes ago was entirely replaced by raw fear, profound disbelief, and crushing public shame. Arthur stared directly into Richard's panicked eyes. "I am going to teach you a permanent lesson, Kingsley. True power is not measured by diamond necklaces, expensive gowns, or cruel mockery. True power," Arthur continued, "is rooted entirely in possessing basic respect for others. And tonight, your entire family completely failed to demonstrate even a fraction of it. The resulting silence was so profound that the gentle clinking of a silver fork dropping onto a plate sounded like a gunshot. A prominent financial journalist named David, standing near the back bar, was typing frantically on his digital tablet, fully aware he was actively documenting the total destruction of a New York dynasty. Barbara, absolutely desperate to save their empire, took a stumbling step forward and shockingly fell to her knees right in front of Arthur and Eleanor. "Please," Barbara begged, her perfectly constructed facade entirely destroyed, her voice breaking into pathetic sobs. "You cannot possibly do this to us. Think of what this massive financial loss means for our legacy, for our charity foundation, for our entire standing in the city." The shocking sight of Barbara Kingsley, the undisputed queen of Manhattan society, sobbing on the floor drew terrified gasps from the crowd. Arthur looked down at her with zero pity. "Do you finally understand what it feels like to be completely humiliated in front of everyone? Because that is exactly what you intentionally did to my wife." Richard, hyperventilating slightly, attempted a final, desperate negotiation. "Arthur, please, let us stop this madness. We can easily renegotiate the financial terms of the deal in your favor. I am certain we can find a highly profitable solution for both of us." Arthur let out a dry, humorless laugh. "You truly do not comprehend the situation at all, Richard. This has absolutely nothing to do with money. This is about respect, and you possess absolutely nothing left to offer me." Arthur reached inside his tailored jacket and slowly pulled out a folded legal document, holding it up for the patriarch to see. "Did you honestly believe canceling a single contract was the full extent of my reach?" Arthur asked smoothly. "Miller Capital Partners secretly acquired 35% of the voting shares in Kingsley Global over the past 6 months. I am officially your largest majority shareholder." The explosive revelation sent the entire room into total chaos. Richard stumbled backward as if he had been physically struck, his face completely devoid of hope. "I am calling an emergency board meeting for 9 o'clock on Monday morning," Arthur declared, his voice ringing with absolute finality. "Prepare yourselves to lose everything." Eleanor looked down at the ruined family. "You mocked me because you thought I was weak," she said clearly. "Tonight, you learned I am the one standing above you." By the time the sun rose over the towering skyscrapers of New York City the following morning, the digital front pages of every major financial newspaper carried the exact same explosive headline: "Scandal at the Plaza. Miller cancels mega deal and seizes control of Kingsley Empire." The damning videos secretly recorded by the wealthy attendees, combined perfectly with Thomas Kingsley's disastrous live broadcast, had gone massively viral in a matter of hours. It was no longer simply thousands of people who had witnessed the cruel event. It was tens of millions across the entire globe. The public outrage was swift, brutal, and entirely merciless toward the fallen family. The disgustingly arrogant treatment of Eleanor Miller instantly became a powerful, global symbol of the extreme toxicity and profound disconnect of the ultra-wealthy elite. Across all major social media platforms, hashtags demanding the complete removal of the Kingsleys dominated the trending charts. Victoria desperately attempted to salvage her completely ruined reputation by publishing a lengthy, heavily edited apology statement, claiming the entire event was a tragic misunderstanding, but the public violently rejected her lies, flooding her accounts with relentless criticism. Barbara, far too proud and thoroughly humiliated to show her face, locked herself inside her massive penthouse in complete silence. Thomas suffered the most immediate digital backlash. Realizing with horror that he had personally broadcast the absolute ruin of his own powerful family, he frantically recorded a 10-minute apology video, staring into the camera with puffy, tear-filled eyes, begging his massive audience for forgiveness. However, the internet showed absolutely no mercy. The comment section was a graveyard of insults, labeling him as the foolish boy who live-streamed his family's demise. Thoroughly defeated and mentally exhausted, Thomas permanently deleted all of his social media accounts, erasing the digital empire he had spent years building. When Monday morning arrived, exactly as Arthur had publicly promised, The executive board of directors for Kingsley Global convened an emergency meeting in their towering Wall Street headquarters. The atmosphere in the heavily air-conditioned boardroom was incredibly tense. The other major shareholders, terrified by the massive drop in their stock prices and the total destruction of the company's public image, demanded immediate, sweeping changes. Arthur, sitting powerfully at the head of the massive mahogany table, with Eleanor seated calmly by his side, presented a meticulously detailed dossier outlining the catastrophic damage the Kingsley family had inflicted upon the corporate brand. The final vote among the executives was swift and completely unanimous. The Kingsley family was entirely stripped of all executive control. Richard was forcibly retired, relegated to a powerless, unpaid honorary title. Barbara was officially removed from the board of the family's prestigious charity foundation. Victoria was immediately fired from her high-paying position in public relations, and Thomas was legally barred from ever representing the company in any capacity. Instead of taking the chief executive position for himself, Arthur strategically appointed a highly diverse, incredibly experienced new board of directors, ensuring the toxic, arrogant culture of the Kingsleys was permanently eradicated from the corporate structure. Over the next 2 years, the dramatic story of that fateful night in Manhattan evolved from a shocking high society scandal into a legendary tale of absolute justice. The wealthy Kingsleys practically vanished from the elite social scene. Richard spent his days hiding in a secluded estate, while Victoria's desperate attempts to relocate and rebrand herself in California failed miserably, as her notorious last name actively repelled anyone she tried to associate with. Meanwhile, Eleanor Miller emerged from the ordeal not merely as the quiet wife of a financial titan, but as a deeply respected, powerful voice advocating for human dignity and corporate ethics on a global stage. Standing behind a polished wooden podium at a major summit on human rights held at the United Nations headquarters in New York, Eleanor looked out over an audience of thousands of global leaders. She wore a simple, elegant blue dress, her presence commanding absolute, unwavering respect. She smiled softly, remembering the dark wine stain and the cruel laughter that had ultimately failed to break her spirit. She adjusted the microphone, her clear voice carrying a profound weight that instantly silenced the massive auditorium. True respect and enduring legacy are never built upon the fragile foundations of designer clothing, heavy diamond necklaces, or the cruel mockery of those we falsely believe to be beneath us. In my life, I have witnessed the highest echelons of wealth crumble to absolute dust in a matter of seconds because they lacked the fundamental decency that makes us truly human. We often measure power by the size of a bank account or the exclusivity of a guest list. Yet genuine strength lies in our ability to stand firmly in our own dignity when the world attempts to strip it away. It is an undeniable truth that arrogance is simply a mask for profound insecurity, while quiet resilience has the extraordinary power to silently dismantle entire empires. As we navigate the complex, often superficial hierarchies of our modern world, we must always remember that our character is our only true currency. The way we treat the most vulnerable person in the room is the ultimate, undeniable reflection of our own lasting worth.